Your mind is destroying you, and you don't even know it, because most of the battles you think you're fighting out in the world are actually happening inside your own head. You wake up each day believing your circumstances are the problem, your past is the problem, the people around you are the problem, but the truth is far quieter and far more uncomfortable. It's your mind. It's the stories you repeat until they become prisons. It's the fears you nurture until they feel like facts. It's the doubts you allow to sit so long that they start to look like reality. Your mind whispers constantly, and because you've never questioned its voice, you mistake its noise for truth. You think you are not enough. You think you are broken. You think you are behind, unwanted, invisible, or doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. But none of that is reality. It is simply the narrative your mind has crafted, and somewhere along the way, you accepted it without a fight. You accepted it because it sounded familiar, and familiarity often feels safer than change, even when it hurts. Your mind destroys you not with loud explosions, but with quiet erosion. One negative thought that becomes a belief, one fear that becomes a limitation, one painful memory that becomes your identity. All of it happening silently while you think you're just thinking. You don't recognize the damage because the voice sounds like yours, but not every thought you have belongs to you. Some belong to old wounds. Some belong to past versions of yourself. Some belong to people who taught you to see yourself through their eyes, not your own. The world outside you is rarely the cage. The mind is, and a cage built inside your mind is harder to escape because you can't always see the bars. You feel trapped but you don't know why. You feel exhausted without doing much. You feel scared without danger. You feel unworthy without cause. This is the mind, untrained and unchecked, holding power it was never meant to hold. But here's the truth: your mind doesn't want you to realize you can take your power back. The moment you become aware of the voice, it begins to lose its control. When you observe your thoughts instead of obeying them, the illusion breaks. You start to see the difference between what you think and what is true. You notice the mind exaggerating and assuming. You see how it jumps to conclusions, imagines worst-case scenarios, and paints catastrophes out of shadows. You see how it magnifies your flaws and diminishes your strengths. You see how it sabotages your potential long before life gets the chance to challenge you. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. Once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. And when you stop taking every thought seriously, you create space. In that space, you breathe, you question, you choose. You take back control from the automatic reactions that once ran your life. You stop letting fear dictate your decisions. You stop letting insecurity control your voice. You stop letting memories from the past decide the future you deserve. Your mind will resist at first. It will pull you back into old narratives because that's what it knows. It will remind you of your failures, your pain, your flaws. But if you stay aware, if you stay conscious, the mind eventually learns to follow instead of lead. It becomes a tool instead of a threat. It becomes a servant instead of a master. You are not meant to be ruled by your mind. You are meant to guide it. Thoughts are not commands. Feelings are not fate. The voice in your head is not the truth. It is only noise until you decide otherwise. The moment you understand this, you stop being a prisoner. You stop being your own enemy. You stop destroying yourself without realizing it. And for the first time, you step into life with clarity instead of confusion, strength instead of fear, and awareness instead of illusion. Awareness is the first gate to freedom, because it is the moment you stop living on autopilot and begin to recognize the forces shaping your thoughts, emotions, and actions. Most people believe they are choosing their reactions, but in truth, they are repeating patterns formed by habit, conditioning, and unconscious influence. Awareness is the split second in which the fog clears, even slightly, and you see yourself as you are, not as the mind's stories portray you. This recognition is powerful because nothing can be changed, released, or transcended until it is first acknowledged. You cannot free yourself from a prison you cannot see, and the most limiting prison is the one built inside the mind. When you become aware, you begin to notice the constant stream of thoughts that normally pass through you unseen. You notice how quickly the mind judges, fears, seeks, resists, or reacts. You may catch the moment a small worry becomes a spiral of anxiety. or the moment a memory shapes your emotional state without your permission. Awareness does not immediately stop these patterns, but it shines a light on them. And the moment something is illuminated, its power over you begins to weaken. A thought can only dominate you when it operates in the dark, disguised as truth. When it is observed with clarity, it becomes what it truly is, a temporary mental event, not a command. Awareness also reveals the gap between stimulus and response. Most people believe their emotions are automatic, that anger, sadness, or irritation simply happen. But with awareness, you can detect the precise moment an emotion begins to arise. You can feel the tightening in the chest, the shift in breathing, the rush of heat, the subtle tension before a reaction takes shape. In this gap lies the first glimpse of freedom. You can choose to breathe instead of explode, reflect instead of react, and act with intention instead of being swept away by impulse. Awareness gives you space, and space gives you choice. Another dimension of awareness is recognizing the stories that define your identity. The mind loves narratives, stories about who you are, what you can do, what others think, what is possible or impossible. These stories are deeply convincing because they have been repeated for years, sometimes decades. Without awareness, you accept them as reality. But with awareness, you begin to question them. You start to see that many of your limitations are inherited, learned, or imagined. You realize you have been acting out a script that was never written by you. Awareness allows you to step outside this script and become the author instead of the character. Awareness also exposes how much of your suffering is self-created, not because pain is imaginary, but because the mind often amplifies and prolongs discomfort through rumination, fear, and resistance. When you become aware of this process, suffering transforms. Physical pain may remain, life challenges may still arise, but the unnecessary mental layers begin to fall away. The moment you observe the mind adding stories to the situation, predicting worst outcomes, revisiting past failures, or creating fear, you are no longer trapped inside the story. Awareness separates you from the spiral. This is a profound freedom, the freedom not from life's events, but from the mind's exaggerated interpretations of them. Awareness is also the foundation of discipline. You cannot improve what you cannot see. If you want to train the mind, strengthen your character, or cultivate calmness, awareness is the starting point. It shows you where your triggers lie, where your weaknesses arise, and where your habits originate. This is not self-criticism, it is self-understanding. Awareness does not judge, it simply reveals. And what is revealed can be reshaped through practice and attention. Even in relationships, awareness is transformative. You begin to notice when you project your insecurities onto others, when you listen with the intent to respond rather than to understand, and when you defend your ego instead of opening your heart. Awareness turns interactions into opportunities for growth rather than arenas for conflict. You stop assuming motives, stop jumping to conclusions, and begin to see the humanity in others with greater clarity. Ultimately, awareness reconnects you to the present moment. The mind constantly drags you into the past or the future, but awareness anchors you in the only place where life actually happens. In the present, you find calmness, clarity, and a sense of real control. Not control over external circumstances, but control over your inner world, which is where your true freedom resides. Your thoughts are not facts because the mind often speaks with confidence, even when it has no evidence. Thoughts arise from memory, emotion, habit, and perception, but not necessarily from truth. The mind constructs stories to make sense of experiences, yet those stories are filtered through personal bias, fear, past wounds, and assumptions. A thought can feel urgent, convincing, or overwhelming, but its intensity does not make it accurate. Recognizing this is a crucial step toward inner freedom, because when you stop treating your thoughts as unquestionable truth, you stop being controlled by them. Consider how quickly the mind generates interpretations. Someone doesn't reply to your message, and suddenly you think they're ignoring you. A project becomes challenging, and you think you're not capable. You make one mistake, and the mind decides you always fail. These thoughts are conclusions drawn from emotion, not reality. The mind reacts first, interprets second, and only rarely pauses to verify. Yet without awareness, you live as though these interpretations represent objective facts. When the mind whispers, you're not enough. You feel it as though the world has confirmed it. When it says, everyone is judging you, you behave as though you have proof. This is how unexamined thoughts quietly shape your behavior, confidence, and decisions. Thoughts are influenced by your emotional state. When you are tired, stressed, or anxious, the mind leans toward negativity. The same situation appears worse simply because your internal lens is fogged. On days when you feel strong and balanced, the mind interprets events more positively. If thoughts were facts, they would not shift so dramatically based on mood. Their changeability reveals their nature mental weather patterns, not absolute truths. You are not required to believe every cloudy thought that passes through you. Many thoughts come from old stories created long before you had the maturity to question them. A childhood criticism becomes a lifelong belief about your worth. A past disappointment becomes a rule about what to expect from life. These thoughts are echoes, not evidence. They resurface because the mind repeats what it knows, even if what it knows is harmful. Without awareness, you may mistake these echoes for current truth. When you realize they are simply outdated mental recordings, you begin to disentangle yourself from them. Thoughts also arise from fear, which is one of the mind's strongest motivators. Fear exaggerates possibilities, invents threats, and imagines worst-case scenarios. The mind acts as if preparing for danger, but in doing so it often magnifies harmless situations. When fear-driven thoughts appear, they feel urgent because the mind is trying to protect you. Yet protection built on imagination becomes a cage. The ability to notice fear-based thoughts without obeying them is what allows you to move forward instead of shrinking back. The mind is also prone to cognitive distortions, patterns such as catastrophizing, overgeneralizing, or personalizing. These distortions twist reality into shapes that fit your insecurities. You may assume the worst outcome even when the probability is low. You may turn a small setback into a sweeping judgment of your character. You may interpret someone's neutral behavior as a reflection of your flaws. The problem is not that the mind creates these interpretations. The problem is that you often believe them without question. The moment you recognize these distortions for what they are, mental habits, you stop mistaking them for the truth. Understanding that thoughts are not facts does not mean rejecting all of them. It means observing them before accepting them. It means recognizing that a thought is an internal event, not an external reality. This awareness creates space between the impulse and the belief. You can watch a thought arise, feel its emotional pull, and still choose not to follow it. This is the beginning of mental clarity, the ability to notice a thought without surrendering to it. When you stop treating thoughts as facts, you gain the freedom to respond rather than react. You become capable of questioning your assumptions, investigating your fears, and challenging the stories that limit you. You begin to see that thoughts are suggestions, not commands. They can guide you, but they do not have authority over you unless you give it to them. The mind becomes a tool instead of a master. Where focus goes, energy flows because the mind acts like a magnet that pulls your attention, choices, and emotional strength toward whatever it repeatedly engages with. The direction of your focus is not passive, it is an active force that shapes your inner state and outer reality. Most people underestimate how powerful this principle is because it works quietly and continuously. Even when you are not paying attention to what you are focusing on, your energy is being directed somewhere, and that direction determines the momentum of your life. If your attention gravitates toward fear, doubt, and obstacles, your actions will reflect that. If your attention leans toward possibilities, solutions, and growth, your behavior will align with that too. Your focus is the steering wheel of your inner world, and wherever you turn it, your energy follows. The mind cannot hold everything at once. It selects, filters, and prioritizes. Because of this, what you choose to focus on becomes the dominant force that shapes how you interpret your experiences. Two people can face the same situation and walk away with completely different understandings because their focus was placed in different areas. One might see opportunity while the other sees threat. One might notice progress while the other fixates on imperfections. The circumstance is the same, but the experience is different because the spotlight of the mind was pointed in different directions. Focus determines what becomes magnified, and what becomes invisible. When your focus is directed toward problems, you feed them with emotional energy. The more you think about what is wrong, the more painful, overwhelming, or impossible it seems. Even small issues grow when attention keeps nourishing them. The mind reinforces what it repeats. A thought dwelled upon becomes a pattern, and a pattern becomes a tendency. Eventually, problems begin to feel like the dominant theme of your life, not because they are many, but because they are constantly in your line of sight. What you continually return to mentally becomes the lens through which you see the world. The same principle works in the opposite direction. When your focus is directed towards solutions, even small possibilities expand. Energy flows toward the potential you identify. Opportunities that were previously hidden start to appear because your attention is finally tuned to notice them. A shift in focus does not magically erase challenges, but it allows you to respond with clarity instead of being consumed by the problem. Your mind becomes oriented toward forward movement instead of stagnation. Focus acts like sunlight. Whatever it shines on grows. Your emotional state is also shaped by where your focus goes. If you spend your mental energy replaying failures or anticipating negative outcomes, you create a constant state of tension. Your body responds as if danger is present even when nothing is happening. This drains motivation, confidence, and joy. But when you direct your attention toward gratitude, progress, or what is within your control, your emotional state becomes more balanced and grounded. The mind naturally amplifies whatever it focuses on, so focusing on even small positive things can shift your inner experience in meaningful ways. It strengthens resilience and reduces the intensity of negative emotions. Relationships are deeply affected by focus as well. When you consistently notice someone's flaws, those flaws begin to dominate your perception of them. The relationship becomes shaped by irritation, criticism, or disappointment. But when you focus on their efforts, strengths, or intentions, the relationship takes on a different tone. This does not mean ignoring issues, it means choosing where to place your attention, so the relationship is nourished rather than drained. The energy you give to others is a reflection of where your focus rests. Your focus also shapes your sense of identity. If you give your attention to your shortcomings, you reinforce a limited version of yourself. If you focus on your potential, you activate qualities that may have been dormant. The stories you tell yourself about who you are gain power through repetition. What you highlight internally becomes what you believe about yourself, and what you believe becomes the foundation for how you act. Focus directs not just energy, but identity, momentum, and behavior. Even your future is influenced by where your attention goes. When your mind constantly drifts toward fears about tomorrow or regrets from yesterday, you are investing your energy in places that cannot be changed. This leaves little strength for the present moment, which is the only place where real progress can be made. But when you focus on the next step, the next decision, the next small action you can take, your energy becomes purposeful. You move with intention instead of being pulled by mental noise. Your focus becomes a guiding force rather than a source of distraction. Stillness reveals truth, because in the quiet space beyond distraction, the mind no longer distorts reality with noise, tension, and habitual interpretations. Most people live surrounded by constant stimulation, sounds, notifications, responsibilities, conversations, worries. This relentless activity creates an inner turbulence that prevents them from seeing clearly. Just as muddy water settles when left undisturbed, the mind gains clarity when you allow it to be still. In stillness, thoughts lose their urgency, emotions loosen their grip, and the deeper layers of your awareness begin to surface. This clarity is not something you force, it emerges naturally when the mind stops trying to control, analyze, and anticipate everything. When you become still, you start to notice how much of your mental activity is automatic. Thoughts rush in without your choosing. Emotions rise and fall based on memories and interpretations. The mind jumps from one topic to another, rarely staying present. In everyday life, this constant movement feels normal, so you assume it is how the mind is supposed to function. But when you pause and become aware, even for a few moments, you see how restless the inner world truly is. This restlessness is what clouds judgment, amplifies fear, and creates confusion. Stillness reveals this turbulence not as your identity, but as a passing activity. Once you recognize this, you are no longer trapped in it. Stillness creates distance between you and your thoughts. When the mind is noisy, thoughts feel like commands. They tell you what to fear, what to assume, what to expect, and you obey without question. But when you sit in stillness, those same thoughts appear like waves rising and falling. You notice them, but you do not get swept away. This observation shows you that thoughts are not who you are. They are events happening within your awareness. This simple realization is one of the deepest truths. Stillness can reveal the mind generates stories, but you are the one who perceives them. When you can see this distinction, you gain the power to choose which thoughts deserve your energy and which should pass. Stillness also reveals emotional truth. Many feelings that dominate your life are not reactions to the present moment, but echoes from the past or projections into the future. Without stillness, these feelings blend into your current experience, making it difficult to know what is real. When you allow yourself to be still, emotions rise to the surface without the usual distractions to suppress them. You can feel them clearly and understand their roots. Instead of running from discomfort or numbing yourself with activity, you face what is inside. This honest confrontation brings insight: why certain triggers affect you, what unresolved pain you carry, and how your emotional patterns shape your choices. Stillness does not create emotional truth, it simply exposes what was already there. In moments of stillness, your intuition becomes more accessible. Intuition is often drowned out by overthinking, fear, and mental noise. But when the mind quiets, a subtle inner knowing starts to emerge. It is not dramatic or loud. It is simple, steady, and clear. This inner guidance helps you understand what matters, what needs attention, and what can be released. Many people struggle to make decisions because they rely solely on mental analysis, which becomes overwhelming. Stillness allows you to sense direction rather than calculate it. This clarity is not based on impulse, but on deep alignment with your values and inner truth. Stillness also reveals the truth about the present moment. Most suffering comes from being trapped in time, regretting the past or fearing the future. The mind constantly pulls you away from now, but in stillness, the pull weakens. You begin to feel the simplicity and fullness of the present, which is free from stories and interpretations. This presence is not an idea, it is a lived experience. When you are fully in the present, you see the world without the filter of expectation or judgment. This clarity shows you that many of your problems exist only in thought, not in reality. The present moment holds a truth that the restless mind cannot access. Stillness reveals truth about your needs and boundaries as well. In the business of life, it is easy to confuse pressure with responsibility, noise with importance, and obligation with purpose. When you become still, you can distinguish between what you do out of fear and what you do out of authenticity. You recognize which commitments drain you and which nourish you. You understand where you have been overextending yourself and where you have been holding back. This understanding is not intellectual. It arises from a deeper connection with yourself. Ultimately, stillness reveals truth because it removes the filters, distortions, and emotional storms that obscure your perception. In quiet moments, you meet yourself without distraction, without masks, and without the stories you usually rely on. In that meeting, truth becomes visible. Self-mastery begins with small choices because the foundation of discipline, character, and inner strength is built not in grand moments, but in the tiny decisions you make repeatedly throughout each day. People often imagine self-mastery as a dramatic transformation, a sudden moment of awakening, or a powerful surge of willpower that changes everything. But real mastery grows quietly. It forms in the unnoticed moments when you choose to act with intention instead of habit, awareness instead of impulse, patience instead of reactivity. These small choices accumulate, shaping your behavior, your mindset, and eventually your identity. Every small choice is a vote for the person you are becoming. When you choose to get up a little earlier, breathe before reacting, complete a task you would rather avoid, or speak kindly when irritated, you reinforce a version of yourself that is capable, resilient, and disciplined. These actions may feel insignificant in the moment, but they strengthen the mental pathways that define your future behavior. The mind learns through repetition, and each deliberate choice trains it to respond more consciously. Over time, these choices create a pattern, and that pattern becomes who you are. Self-mastery is not about controlling everything at once, it is about managing the next moment. When you break life down into small, manageable decisions, discipline becomes accessible. You do not need to overcome your entire set of weaknesses in a single day. You simply need to choose the next right action. These micro decisions are powerful because they build momentum. A small act of discipline makes the next one slightly easier, and each success becomes a stepping stone toward greater strength. Mastery does not come from intensity but from consistency. Small choices also reveal your relationship with yourself. When you regularly follow through on commitments, even tiny ones, you build trust in your own ability to act with intention. This self-trust is essential because without it, you cannot rely on your own word. Many people aspire to big goals but abandon the small habits that lead to them. They dream of transformation but struggle to keep simple promises to themselves. When you start honoring small commitments, drinking more water, organizing your space, resting when needed, practicing patience, you strengthen the internal bond that supports long-term growth. Small choices matter because they are made during moments when no one is watching. True mastery is not performed, it is practiced in private. It shows in how you treat your mind when it is restless, how you behave when you are tired, how you respond when temptation pulls at you. These quiet decisions test your character more than any public display of discipline. When you choose integrity, focus, or self-control in private moments, you shape a strong internal foundation that guides you naturally in more significant situations. The power of small choices extends to emotional mastery as well. Emotional habits are formed gradually, and the way you respond to subtle triggers determines how you face larger challenges. When you pause before reacting to irritation, breathe through frustration, or question an anxious thought instead of believing it, you train yourself to stay grounded. Over time, these small emotional practices create resilience. You become less easily swayed by external events and less controlled by immediate impulses. This is the heart of emotional self-mastery, being able to feel without being overwhelmed, to observe without being consumed. Small choices influence your environment too. The spaces you live in, the people you interact with, the content you consume, and the routines you follow all shape your mental world. A small change, cleaning your desk, choosing supportive company, limiting distractions, creates a ripple effect on your clarity and focus. The environment you create through small decisions makes discipline easier because you are not constantly fighting unnecessary obstacles. Self-mastery thrives in environments shaped by intention. Your goals are also achieved through tiny steps. No major achievement is made in a leap. It is built piece by piece through small, consistent actions. When you break big goals into small daily tasks, you transform overwhelming ambition into manageable progress. Each small action builds competence, confidence, and clarity. Instead of waiting for motivation, you rely on structure. Instead of depending on emotion, you depend on habit. This shift is what turns effort into ability and intention into reality. Small choices also shape your identity. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, even in the smallest form, you reinforce the identity of someone who is capable of self-control. This identity shift is more important than the action itself. When you repeatedly act like a disciplined person, you begin to believe you are one. And when you believe it, your behavior aligns naturally. Identity grows from action, not the other way around. Self-mastery begins with small choices because these choices mold your character, build your strength, and determine your direction long before the larger challenges arrive. Letting go is a weapon because it frees the mind from unnecessary weight, allowing clarity, strength, and focus to replace confusion, tension, and fear. Many people imagine strength as holding on, fighting harder, pushing through every obstacle with force. But often the greatest power comes from releasing what no longer serves you. Old stories, past pain, unrealistic expectations, uncontrollable outcomes, and identities you have outgrown. Letting go is not weakness. It is the act of reclaiming your energy from places where it is being drained. When you hold on to everything, you become weighed down. When you let go of what is not yours to carry, you become sharper, lighter, and more capable of facing life with presence and intention. Letting go is a weapon because it breaks the cycle of rumination. When something painful happens, the mind tends to replay it repeatedly, trying to rewrite the past or imagine different outcomes. This mental looping does not heal anything, it only deepens the wound by reinforcing emotional patterns. The moment you consciously release the story, the cycle loses its power. You cannot change what happened, but you can choose whether to relive it. Letting go of the story does not mean denying the experience, it means freeing yourself from its grip. This release returns your mental energy to the present moment, where it can be used constructively. Letting go also dismantles attachment to outcomes. You can put effort into your goals, but you cannot control every variable that influences the result. When you cling to specific outcomes, you create tension, anxiety, and frustration. The fear of things not going your way becomes a constant burden. But when you focus on the process and release the obsession with outcomes, you approach challenges with calmness and adaptability. This shift does not mean lowering your standards. It means working with clarity instead of fear. The ability to act without being controlled by the result is one of the most powerful forms of self-mastery, and it begins with letting go. People often carry emotional burdens for years without realizing how heavy they have become. Resentment, guilt, regret, and grudges consume enormous amounts of mental energy. Holding on feels justified because the mind believes these emotions protect you or preserve your identity, but in reality, they trap you in old versions of yourself. Letting go of these emotional burdens is a weapon because it cuts the ties that keep you anchored to the past. It allows you to move forward without dragging old pain into new experiences. Emotional release is not about forgetting. It is about choosing peace over perpetual self-punishment. Letting go also strengthens relationships. Many conflicts arise not from the actual issue, but from the attachment to being right, being understood, or being in control. When you let go of the need to win every argument or prove yourself, you create space for genuine connection. You listen more openly, respond more calmly, and understand more deeply. Relationships flourish not because challenges disappear, but because ego-driven tension dissolves. When you let go of pride, you gain empathy. When you let go of defensiveness, you gain understanding. This ability to release ego is a quiet but powerful weapon that protects relationships from unnecessary damage. Letting go reveals truth as well. When the mind is attached to assumptions, expectations, or fears, it becomes blind to reality. You see what you expect to see rather than what is actually there. Letting go of preconceived ideas clears perception, allowing you to observe situations more objectively. This clarity helps you make better decisions, recognize opportunities, and avoid unnecessary conflict. Letting go does not remove challenges from life, but it removes the distortions that make challenges seem more complex than they are. Letting go is also a weapon against self-limitation. Many people cling to outdated identities, labels given by others, past failures, old achievements, or long-held assumptions about what they can or cannot do. These identities become cages, shaping behavior and limiting potential. When you let go of who you think you must be, you allow yourself to grow into who you actually are. This release unlocks new possibilities, because your energy is no longer trapped in maintaining an image. You become flexible, adaptable, and open to change. Letting go enhances focus. When your mind is cluttered with attachments, worries, and unresolved emotions, your attention becomes scattered. You may feel busy but not productive, active but not effective. When you release mental clutter, your attention sharpens. You can concentrate on what matters because your energy is no longer divided. This clarity is a powerful weapon in work, creativity, personal growth, and problem solving. Letting go ultimately becomes a source of inner peace. The world is full of uncontrollable events, unpredictable outcomes, and impermanent situations. Trying to fight everything creates suffering. Letting go allows you to flow with life rather than resist its natural movement. It transforms struggle into acceptance, confusion into understanding, and heaviness into lightness. This inner freedom becomes a quiet but unshakable strength, a weapon that protects your peace even in the face of uncertainty.